Mechanical shed.
Bing!
For the first time, I'm actually going to be seeing the Flying Scotsman in person, and I'm operating two cameras at the same time at the moment. This is very...
She needs no introduction. The Flying Scotsman is the most iconic engine in the world, and right now her rake of coaches, with the engine herself, are lined up outside Doncaster station, waiting for clearance.
There we go, they're in steam.
Doncaster, like for many of Gresley's engines, is the place of Flying Scotsman's birth, and on this day she returned on her way up to Newcastle from London. The people of Doncaster were keen to make a scene of it, and half of the platform was actually fenced off for ceremonial purposes.
I've just been stood 1 metre away from the Flying Scotsman. What a beauty.
Of course, all of his celebration was down to the fact that the Flying Scotsman had turned 100 years old this year. While everyone was occupied with trying to see the front of the train, I thought I would take the chance to have a look at the rake of coaches. Assisting the Flying Scotsman was a diesel locomotive. Don't mind the guy in the red, just let his tism cook. The Flying Scotsman herself was in the fenced off area, where there was a lot of publicity going on. We had police surrounding the station to protect the engine, and important people from anyone devious. Quite luckily, I was able to get to one of the other platforms and still get a fairly good view of the engine, even if there was a crowd of people in front of them.
There you go.
And with the blow of a whistle, the Flying Scotsman had finished her time in Doncaster and was off for York. It is impossible to deny that it was a beautiful sight to see this massive steam engine pulling away with a rake of coaches. For most people, this was where the Flying Scotsman experience would end for the day. However, there was a train running to York, and it would get there half an hour ahead of Scotsman. You'd have to be a madman to spontaneously decide that you're going to take a train to York just to see the Flying Scotsman twice in one day. And I can tell you, I was that madman. A very nicely decorated train managed to get me to York with time to spare.
I want to see the video.
Once again, the Flying Scotsman was waiting outside for clearance. This time there was a train that had been delayed and was actually on their platform. We had to wait for a Trans-Pennine Express to move out of the way. And then, the Flying Scotsman was allowed to finish her journey for the day. For the most part, this platform was actually more spacious than at Doncaster, so it was very possible for me to get much better footage of the Flying Scotsman making an arrival. Once the train had stopped, I tried to get as close to the Flying Scotsman as possible, as this time the locomotive was not fenced off.
Flying Scotsman has just arrived. Everyone's now gathering round for pictures, but I've managed to get a few, thankfully.
And many an opportunity did I get for pictures. Everyone was gathered round getting the best pictures that they could, and trying to reach over other people. Mind the yellow line? The train would stop here for the day, and then the journey would continue from York the day following, to finish off the journey to Newcastle. Just look at the amount of people that came to spectate this marvel of a machine. But alas, it was soon time for Flying Scotsman to go. sticking on the theme of Doncaster built engines, I'm going to take you through some footage I shot all the way back in September and never actually released up until now. Over to you, old shed. There is a gallery in the town which shelters two very fine engines, including Green Arrow. Green Arrow is another of Gresley's designs built in Doncaster Works back in 1936. They are the first built and sole surviving member of the V2 class, and gets its name from an express freight service. During its years in service, Green Arrow pulled express freight and passenger trains, and was selected for preservation in '62. Almost a decade later, Green Arrow, still in storage, was selected for the National Collection, and joined the National Railway Museum, who currently have ownership of the locomotive. Green Arrow ran in preservation until 2008, when it was retired from active service and became a display piece. In February 2021, Dainham Gallery in Doncaster was loaned Green Arrow. Their town of birth is where they currently rest, but are scheduled to leave the gallery in a year or so. Christopher Audrey granted immortality to Green Arrow by including him as a supporting character in the 35th book of the Railway series, Thomas and the Great Railway Show. In the latter two stories, Green Arrow plays a supporting role in the book, getting more interaction with Thomas than any of the other engines at the museum. The book's plot is that Thomas goes to York to be a part of the exhibit at the National Railway Museum, temporarily of course. He spends a fair bit of time in the workshop having repairs done, and meets Green Arrow there, also being repaired. Green Arrow is said to be a friendly engine, enough for Thomas to be sorry to leave him. Then Green Arrow gets to pull a passenger train to the seaside, but because of how many people are in demand of the service, extra coaches are added to the train, and Thomas volunteers to work with Green Arrow. The service runs from York to Scarborough, and on the way back the rails sink into an embankment, meaning the passengers have to be sent home by bus, and Green Arrow, following Thomas, has to get the empty coaches safely across. We never see or hear from them again, but we know they made it safely back to York. There is no merchandise of Green Arrow, and he isn't likely to appear again anytime soon. But who's this next to Green Arrow? Two engines were sent to Dainham Gallery. Nice to see neither of them had to sit alone in the shed. The C1 Atlantic, number 251, is also the sole survivor of the large Atlantics, and is preserved with its Great Northern Railway lettering. Engines of this class were never named. This class was built between 1902 and 1908 in Doncaster Works, and were able to overcome numerous teething troubles to the point of being recognised as a successful design. In the early 20s, the newer Gresley Pacifics saw to it that the Atlantics were no longer used for the heaviest trains, and would continue to haul lighter expresses, up until about 1950. They would actually be used as recovery engines for when Pacifics broke down. One even got to pull the Flying Scotsman service, arriving to its destination early, which more than made up for time. The last train pulled before this class was taken out of service was a one-way trip from King's Cross to Doncaster, which carried Mr. H.G. Ivett, son of Henry Ivett. He received one of the builder plates. H.A. Ivett, the locomotive, got to pull the train for its return journey from King's Cross, and C1 number 251 was actually present in Doncaster to mark the occasion. In preservation, 251 pulled trains until about 1954, and in 1957 they were placed in York Museum. Like Green Arrow, 251 belongs to the National Railway Museum, and since February 2021 has been on a 3-year loan to Dainham Gallery in Doncaster. No variation of this locomotive has ever been a character in either the Railway series or Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. However, the fandom recognises this class of engine as Alice, an original character created for Sodor the Early Years, now titled Sodor the Modern Years, a series by Wild Nor'Wester. Henry the Green Engine was intended to be an Atlantic design, and for the longest time I imagined the C1 was the intended design for Henry, an engine that rescues Pacifics regularly, and is designed by someone called Henry, and is a stunning design. However, Henry was intended to be a Robinson Atlantic. Not quite the same, but it's nice to dream. There is other memorabilia that you can find in the museum if you're ever in the area and decide to check this place out. But of course, no attraction quite as special as those two engines. There is also the National Rail Museum in York that I would like to take a proper exploration of. I've never really seen the full place, and even when I went to see Scotsman I didn't actually go to see it, so that will be something to do for a future video. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about these fine engines, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Bye!
Mechanical shed.
Bing!